you very much. You can be seated. Yes, Mr. Davis, I see you're up. Can you like to address the court?
I would. I was just hoping to give you a second to settle in. I don't mean to preempt you like that. Your Honor, I hate to ask this question of you, but I have some witness issues as far as asking them when to be where at what time. And as a consequence, I was just wondering if you had a better insight about your availability for next week, or whether it's going to have to.
I have been in contact and by email with Mike Calley, the head of the court administration. He's trying to arrange for another judge to take my week in Cherokee County next week in general sessions. He and I are supposed to talk about that during the lunch break today. I'll be able to tell you more when I talk to him.
Great.
He believes, his preliminary opinion is that he believes he can have somebody who can take that week for me when he stay here. He has not made that commitment.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else before we resume the deposition?
Not from us, Your Honor.
All right. You may proceed.
Thank you.
What value would appraisal courses have for a sitting county council member?
The county council is ultimately responsible for the assessment process as it relates to reassessment, and the county council appoints the board of assessing appeals, which council member appoints those members, including Thompson. And of course, county councils are actively involved with the passage of a county budget, and often county council members do not understand the way revenues are determined as it relates to property tax and millage and vehicles versus homes. And this would be, I felt these classes would be good for him in that regard when we talked about it. But he's primarily, it would be good for him as a council member. But in addition to that, and my thoughts about putting him into purchasing is that, replacing him, transferring to purchasing, is that the county is actively involved in acquiring rights of ways for sewer construction, road construction, or just buying property in general for the county needs. We had no one in the purchasing department that really had experience there. Often we have to rely on outside sources, such as private contractors, to assist us with perhaps estimating what something would be worth at times. And we needed someone that was experienced in that area. And I think a lot of that would stem from the issue that we had to contend with concerning the Beaver Dam Creek project, and lots of others to come along with that. So the training would have been helpful for him in the purchasing department.
Who is Adrian Hicks?
It's Adrian's married name. She was the buyer that was promoted to the assistant purchasing director.
Was she in the buyer 2 position?
I believe she was, yes.
Was that the position that ultimately you intended to transfer Michael Thompson into?
Yes.
In August of 2008, did Michael Thompson inquire to you about the purchasing manager job?
Yes.
Did Adrian Hicks, now Williams, get promoted into the purchasing manager job?
The assistant purchasing manager job, yes. Right.
At the time when Mr. Thompson's appraisal courses were pre-approved, Have you determined that he would be transferring into the buyer two position?
Yes.
Was Michael Thompson's job transfer part of some sort of quid pro quo deal that you had with him in exchange for your vote in favor of your severance agreement?
No.
Did one thing have anything to do with the other?
No.
Did you ever have a conversation with Michael Thompson where you asked him to vote in favor of your severance agreement?
No.
That never happened, did it?
No.
Will you look back at Exhibit 2 for me? Was the lawsuit that you filed against Bob Waldrop and Cindy Wilson primarily about how they were interfering with your supervisory role of county employees?
Yes.
Is that what the items that are listed in your affidavit are intended to discuss?
Yes.
Are these intended to be an exhaustive list of how Robert Waldrop or Cindy Wilson interfered with your duties as the county administrator?
Not an exhaustive list, there's others.
Right. Your lawsuit relates to how they interfered with your supervising employees, correct?
Right.
Your affidavit supports that notion, right?
Correct.
You were asked about a lawsuit involving an individual named Stansel. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Was Cindy Wilson originally a defendant in that lawsuit?
She became a defendant.
When you say she became a defendant, what do you mean?
After depositions were taken from Stansel and Lovelace, and she became a defendant. She was named.
What did Stansel and or Lovelace say that prompted you to add Cindy Wilson as a defendant?
Well, that their information about the garbage company, where they got the information about the garbage company purchasing my car, came from her at some of those meetings they were having, or she was having.
Did you ever happen to learn additional information about who ran the plates on your car in that lawsuit?
Yes.
Who ran it?
I believe the town of Williamson ran them a few times, several times. DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department, I believe.
During discovery, did you learn any additional information about the facts and circumstances under which the town of Williamson ran your plates in that lawsuit?
Yes.
What were those facts?
I was in Washington, D.C., and at that time my wife called me and said another lady had called our home and wanted to speak to me because she had some information that she wanted to share with me concerning this lawsuit. And she wanted to talk to me. So I just called my lawyer, had my lawyer contact her, and that lady determined that she was Robert Stansel's sister-in-law, and she had witnessed meetings where he participated, and where he would, where he said that he, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but where he had paid for a prostitute in order to perform sexual favors on a Williamston dispatcher, or with the Williamston dispatcher, so that Williamston dispatcher would run my tag for him and get information concerning the ownership of my BMW.
Was Cindy Wilson involved in those meetings?
I understand she was.
turn your attention back real briefly to the instance where you testified that you asked for advice from the county attorney about Cindy Wilson's travel reimbursements on a specific occasion. Do you remember that?
Yes.
To your knowledge, was Cindy Wilson ever reprimanded by the Ethics Commission in relation to that travel?
Yes.
That concludes the excerpt that we wanted to play, Your Honor. At this point, I would offer to hand up the original transcript from which those excerpts came.
Any objections to that we put in the record? With the objections that you've already noted and I have not ruled on.
Yes, sir.
Reserved. All right, it'll be admitted with those objections reserved. County, you call us.
At this time, the county is going to call Kelly Nichols. I believe she should be in.
Step out. After stepping. Forward, man, to the center, and be sworn, please.
I'd like to ask you to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you will give the court today in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
If you would take a stand and state your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
Nichols, Nichols.
You can be seated, ma'am. Your witness, Mr. Sessions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Nichols. Thank you for being here. Can you tell the court where you currently live?
I live in Anderson County.
And were you born and raised in Anderson County?
Yes, sir.
Did you spend any time away from Anderson County?
Yes, sir. I lived on St. Simon's Island, Georgia,
For about what period of time?
around 97 to 99 to 2000.
And are you married?
Yes, sir, I am.
How long have you been married?
16 years.
Do you have any children?
Yes, sir, I do.
What are their ages?
13 and 10.
Tell us, if you would, your educational background.
I have a year at Anderson University, and I had 2 years at Tri-County Tech.
And what did you study at those two schools?
When I was in Anderson, I studied art, and when I went to Tri-County Tech, I was in the nursing program.
And what did you do for work after you completed your studies?
I went into retail management, women's apparel.
And where were you working? In the Anderson area?
Yes, sir.
Did you work for any particular company or stores?
I worked for mostly the limited corporation stores like Lerner at the time and Express.
When did you first meet Joey Preston?
I met him around 2002, 2003.
Did you recall what the circumstances were that led you to meet Mr. Preston?
Yes, sir. I was with a friend of mine. Her name was Jenny Carruthers, who is the ex-daughter-in-law of Marshall Carruthers. And we walked into Sullivan's one evening after her and I and some other girlfriends had been out, and we ran into him there.
At that point in time, did you know?
Just for purposes of the record, I know we filed some of this ground yesterday, but just want to make sure that I record preservation. We are obviously checked for relevant purposes, for purposes, for improper impeachment purposes. This testimony has no impact or relationship to the severance.
I note your objection, however, I am going to ask, I assume you're objecting to any questions concerning her personal relationship with your client? Yes, is that your objection? I'll note that those objections are continuing to this line of testimony. And again, you're challenging that evidence. It will be considered challenged, and I will rule on that later. So that evidence will be presented in the form of profit. I believe that I was told in our discussions that perhaps there's other evidence this witness may be offering. So if there's objections to that information, you need to make those objections specific.
I will do that.
Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you understand where we are, Mr. Tesh?
Yes, sir.
Do you need any clarification on that point?
I think I'm okay with that.
Okay, you may proceed.
Ms. Nichols, at the time you first met Mr. Preston, it sounds like you were at Sullivan's with some friends. What happened that night?
Jeannie and I sat down at the bar and we were having a drink, and Mr. Preston was standing with us and we were talking, and Jeannie brought up to him that I was looking for a job because at the time I had just had a baby and I was trying to get out of retail because it was long hours. And of course, it kind of angered me that she did that because that's not why I was there. I wasn't there to talk with Mr. Preston about a job. So we continued to talk about that, and he ultimately asked me to get him a resume, and of course I didn't have one on hand, so I made arrangements to get him one at a later time.
And did you follow up with Mr. Preston in a resume?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did ultimately Mr. Preston hire you to come work for Anderson County?
Yes, sir.
When was that approximately?
That was around 2003,
And
early, or
okay.
later of 2002. My years are,
Okay.
they run close together, yeah.
So it sounds like sometime in late 2002 or early 2003,
Yes.
you were hired by Mr. Preston to work for Anderson County.
Yes.
In what job were you hired?
I was originally hired, I was given an intern position, which was part-time, working with economic development under John Lummis.
And did you ever move into any other jobs within Anderson County?
Yes, sir, I did.
Tell us how that came about. What was the next position you held within Anderson County?
I was with economic development for a short period of time, and I got a call from Mr. Preston, and he said he was taking me out of economic development and putting me in Keep America Beautiful, where I was working under Michelle Strange. So I began working with Keep America Beautiful in the fall of 2002, late 2002.
And was that position with Keep America Beautiful also a part-time position?
Yes, it was.
At some point where you moved into a full-time job?
Yes, sir.
How did that come about?
It came to me through Mr. Preston. He communicated to me that there was a full-time position coming open in Building and Codes. They were looking for a mobile home inspector in that department. So I applied, and other people applied as well, and I was ultimately chosen for the job.
And do you know if Mr. Preston had involvement in your hiring into the Building and Codes job?
I don't know, right offhand if he had anything to do with it. I know Jeff Ricketson was the director of planning who was over that department, and he and Jeff Ricketson were really good friends.
And how did you find out about the full-time job that was available in Building and Codes?
Mr. Preston told me.
What experience or training did you have to prepare you for a job in the Building and Codes department?
None whatsoever until I got the job and I got on the job training for that position.
Did you know about how long you stayed in the job in the Building and Codes department?
I was there from March 2003 till 2006.
And then what happened at that point in time?
In 2006, Mr. Preston notified me that there was a position coming open in stormwater because stormwater was a new program that was getting ready to start up in Anderson County. And I applied for that.
Okay.
And ultimately got that position.
Did you know who hired you into the stormwater department?
It would have been Vic Carpenter at the time. He was over that department.
But you learned about the job availability from Mr. Preston?
Yes, sir.
What were you supposed to do within the stormwater division?
Well, when I first started, it wasn't quite clear what I was to do because the department had not really become a department yet. So they ultimately just started me working with the wastewater department, which was already a developed department, because wastewater deals as close proximity to what I was going to be dealing with, so they put me with them, and I worked under them, under their guidelines, until my department came up.
So would it be fair to say you were the only person that was working in stormwater when you were first hired?
There was David Scott, who was an engineer in that department at the time, and he was in charge of stormwater as it was at that point. So I wouldn't say I was the only one, but I was the only one that had been hired specifically for that.
And what was your title when you first started in the stormwater department?
I was just a stormwater inspector.
And were there any other stormwater inspectors?
No, sir.
What experience or training did you have to prepare you to be a stormwater inspector for Anderson County?
Well, I had some compliance background working through building and codes, dealing with and working with land use. So I knew the proper way to install certain BMPs, which is best management practices with stormwater, like the silt fence that you see on construction sites. So I had some knowledge of how that was to be installed. So that was pretty much all I had at that time.
And once you got the job as a stormwater inspector, did you get any training or certification that would apply to your work in the stormwater department?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was that?
I went through the Clemson extension and went to classes and became certified.
And once you got your certification, did you get a pay raise?
I did.
Do you know who was responsible for your pay raise? The decision to give you a pay raise?
Vic Carpenter would have been the one to have to sign off on the PAF.
Okay. And did your job classification or title change in any way once you got your certification?
Yes, it did.
How so?
I became lead stormwater inspector.
And as lead stormwater inspector, were you in charge of supervising any other stormwater inspectors?
No, sir.
Were there any other stormwater?
No, sir.
Do you know who made the decision to change your title to lead stormwater inspector?
To my knowledge, Mr. Preston was.
Was the job of building and codes and the job in stormwater were both full-time jobs?
Yes, sir.
Was Mr. Preston your supervisor within the county at any point in time?
No, sir.
Was he the boss of your supervisor?
Yes, sir.
Was it that direct in terms of you had a boss and then that boss's boss? Was Mr.
There was a chain of command, yes.
And Mr. Preston was one step removed from you in the chain of command?
I would say there was maybe, at one time there was only one person between him and I, and then it soon became two people between him and I.
Were you assigned other jobs or responsibilities within Anderson County where you did have to report directly to Mr. Preston?
Yes, I was in charge of a certain department when we started the balloon festival, and because I was involved in that, I did have to communicate with him directly.
And what responsibilities did you have in connection with the Anderson Balloon Festival event?
I was in charge of the VIP area, which was an area of service for the guests or the people that came to perform at the balloon festivals.
And did you report directly to Mr. Preston about that assignment?
At times, yes.
And what did you have to do as part of that assignment? What did you actually do with the
I
festival?
I had to set up who was going to do the catering of the event, and I dealt with the entertainment. I was the one that helped with them some.
And did you have to attend the event itself?
Yes, sir.
And did Mr. Preston attend the event with you?
He was always present.
Brother, I mean, at some point, are we gonna talk about the service agreement in this case?
Let's move on to something that I would consider relevant. I